So it looks like a bunch of folks have already started logging in. Hopefully everybody can see this intro screen here. Awesome, I'm getting a thumbs up from Josh Cripps. Sweet, so just wanna welcome everybody here to the Sierra Mountain Center Online Adventure Series. This is the third installment. So far we've heard from SP Parker about skiing down in Antarctica. Louis Allen took us up to the Kahiltna in Alaska and took us on some alpine climbing adventures up there in the cold. And today I'm gonna talk a little bit about some of my progression as a budding alpine climber, starting down the guiding track, and sort of a progression that led me to get to stand on top of a handful of really cool summits down in Patagonia, as well as here in the Sierra, in Yosemite, and just kind of covering some of the highlights of my recent climbing career, and hopefully kind of giving everyone a little bit of excitement, a little bit of sparking the fires and getting stoked for summer when we can get back into the mountains. I know everybody's getting a little stir crazy, I'm sure. Hopefully everyone's training and just getting ready for when we can get back out and really kind of give her. And then another big thing that I want to really touch on throughout this slideshow is just how much fun and adventure and excitement you can have even close to home. A big theme that I just kind of want to thread through this entire presentation is just how much adventure you can have in uncertainty. Leaving the maps behind, going into your backyard and just exploring. And in this age of information, that can be hard to do, right? We have the internet, we have all this beta, guidebooks, etc. So leaving all that stuff behind and really kind of getting after it is a theme that I want to really highlight here. So my slideshow here is, it's all about really climbing in Patagonia, but it's how I got there. I haven't and continue not to be any sort of badass alpinist. The subtitle that I wanted to use was how a punter managed to stand on top of a handful of cool things. So it's like, this is all accessible. Like if you have the time, if you have the goal setting ability and the ability to train and just put effort in, then all this stuff that I'm about to cover is accessible and it's doable. So I kind of want to make that clear from the get-go. I want to remain humble through all of this. A little bit about me. I am a full-time mountain guide. I live in the Sierra Nevada, Mammoth Lakes, California. But I get to spend a lot of time traveling around the world and climbing on rock, alpine, on my skis. And yeah, I'm certified in all those three disciplines. I'm a fully certified mountain guide. But this slideshow kind of mirrors my track down that guiding realm in terms of taking my courses, taking my exams. A lot of these trips that I'm going to talk about in this slideshow really just got me ready for the courses and exams. It got me comfortable in being in that environment. So it's kind of the how to, if you've got questions about becoming a guide or like, how do I get the experience? This was my roadmap to success. A little bit of housekeeping. This program should take about an hour or so, but really want to engage with people and make sure that everyone's getting their questions answered, and I'm happy to go down some rabbit holes. So let's really try to utilize that chat window. On the side, feel free to throw in your questions, and if it's pertinent, maybe we can answer them right away, but maybe we kind of gloss over it. And then at the very end, when we're all done here, then I'll open up everybody's mics and video, and we can kind of have like a little, online chat around the fireside here, and do a little Q&A and stuff. Sweet. So yeah, kind of going back to a little bit more about me and and what I do and where I live, I get to spend a lot of time here in the Sierra Nevada working with amazing guests that have really become lifelong friends. Bernd and Sandra here, we're standing on top of Mount Whitney after doing the east face of Mount Whitney, and we've gotten to do a bunch of cool stuff as well in the past, and I see a whole lot of other folks that I've really had the fortune and opportunity to work with. And so this is really what gets my motor running, is being up in the mountains in the summertime, working with folks that that really enjoy being there. And so I'm really fired up to get back into the mountains with all of you once all the dust settles here. But I didn't come from the Sierra Nevada. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, where a lot of climbers cut their teeth. This is me and my dad standing on top of a peak in the Olympic mountain range. And my folks weren't necessarily super adventurous climbers. You know, my dad scrapped his way up Mount Rainier back when he was 19, but really they kind of stoked the fires of adventure in me early on by stuffing me and my brother into a little Volkswagen van for months at a time and traveling around Europe and really kind of getting that adventurous spirit set in right from the get-go. So during college, early on in college, I was really just fired up about, yeah, someone's eating carrots in the background, it sounds like. I was really fired up about rock climbing, and that really wasn't one of the focus factors of climbing the Pacific Northwest. Like I was able to get onto the glaciers and do some snow climbing and climb Baker and Shuckson and all those kind of like, you know, great basic Pacific Northwest, North Cascades climbs. But I was way more fired up about rock climbing. And since the Pacific Northwest climbing season lasts all of about 2 weeks in between rain showers in the summer, I was out of there. So as soon as I graduated from Western Washington and packed up with my outdoor adventure degree, I booked it straight to Yosemite. And for everybody that's been to Yosemite and those who haven't, you come around the corner and the first sight you see is just this massive vista. And the first time that I went there, I was climbing with a buddy and he made me pull over. I was driving so that I didn't just careen off the road, off the cliffs, because I was rubbernecking so much that he thought that I was going to kill us all. So I just really made climbing in Yosemite and climbing these walls my focus for a couple of years, just with almost no other distraction. And when you go into the valley, you stand below these walls and they look really big from afar. And then when you strap onto them, they look even bigger. They just feel so intimidating. You just have this like terror welling up inside of you. And climbing these routes on these big walls, even when they're the easiest big wall routes, you're almost doomed to failure from the get-go. Like there's just so many reasons that you have to bail that you almost know in advance that you're going to end up back on the ground without topping out on the thing. Because you're frightened, scared. There's all this exposure. The work is hard. I mean, this is like blue collar work. You know, everyone wants to like glorify big wall climbing and think it's super sexy after watching Free Solo, and really it's just like working on a vertical loading dock. Like the days are long, the work is hard. It's like the fear is real. So there was a lot of this, you know, kind of question mark look going on. Like, am I ready to be here? Should I be here? I probably shouldn't be here. And that just seems like it's typical for, you know, everybody that I know. Like no one steps up to the plate and hops on to El Cap and just sends on their first go. It's bail after bail. There's tons of failing. So it sounds like there's a bunch of chatter, and I'm going to just take a quick second and manage you all, because there's seems like there's some people that need to be muted.
I'm muted.
It looks like most people are muted. Mute all. Cool. I'm not the tech guy, so thanks for keeping things in check there in the chat window. So yeah, there was just so many bails, like whether they were bails from the get-go, like we didn't even make it out of Camp 4, or bails from 20 pitches up the nose. And these are not the looks of being really psyched. So it just takes a lot of this time being spent and understanding where your limitations are. And a lot of times that came down to partnerships, but as well as just kind of comfort in the environment. So the more time you spend in this vertical environment, the more you become comfortable being here, and you can actually start to have somewhat of a fun time. It's still super hard. The blue collar work doesn't go away, but you can actually enjoy where you're at and kind of soak it all in and just recognize how cool of a place you're getting to visit. So kind of think of it as like vertical tourism. And then you get to focus on the fun stuff, like which Hawaiian shirt to wear on your way up El Cap. And a really big piece of the success that I've had big wall climbing in Yosemite is the mentorship and the partnerships that I've been able to have. This is my buddy Rob Dillon. He was a course director of mine at the Outward Bound School in Patagonia, and when I got called up by him to do a route, I was totally getting called up to the big leagues. I'd just done a handful of really low end big wall climbs before, and we strap onto the North America Wall as the first route that we do together, and we start the thing in 80-degree temperatures and end it with just sideways sleet, super crazy winter storm starting. This is like early November. And so we really kind of grew together as a partnership. He was an awesome mentor, like just knew enough to kind of push me and send me up on those hard pitches that I had no business being on, but just that little bit of confidence really kind of helped me push through. And so this picture was taken by me of Rob on this route we did together in 2009 called Tribal Right. And this was only my third El Cap route and is way beyond what I should have been doing as a third route. Kind of breaks off right from the nose and goes straight up from there. A4, like hard aid climbing. And we spent 10 days getting ourselves and our kit up this thing, and it took long enough that by the time we topped out, our legs had gone to jelly and we're falling all over the place. But all that really great mentorship that Rob gave me, specifically in what to wear on the big wall, like a tuxedo shirt and a bolo tie, that really helped me kind of grow as a climber, and then I could in turn become a mentor to friends of mine that had even less experience than I did. This is my buddy Taylor, and we're climbing on a steep route.
How you doing this morning,
on the right side of El Cap.
Oh, I just need some time to think about life and how good it is. So you decide to get the bejesus out of myself. But you know what? You don't have to look down. You just gotta look up. Gotta look up. Oh.
And climbing in Yosemite is awesome, but it kind of feels constrictive too. Like these walls are just closing in above you, and it's very much like one-dimensional there. Like everyone's just focused on climbing. climbing. And it's hot as all get out in the summertime. So after I moved down to the valley and kind of made climbing my sole passion there, Michael's asking who dropped the rope down. Yeah, that was another good learning lesson. When you're fixing ropes the day prior, leave it clipped into something on the wall. Otherwise you're ascending super steep, scary overhanging ropes like that. But I got a job working for the Outward Bound School, taking teens and young adults, college age kids out into the backcountry for 14 to 22 day long trips, and really just immediately understood how much more there was that the California mountain ranges offered than just these big walls in Yosemite. The Sierra Nevada is just this massive range that encompasses big walls, big ridges, expansive views. And so I was just fired up. Like, I got to spend weeks upon weeks in this range, and I got paid peanuts, but had all the time in the world to climb on either side because I was just really working for them in the summertime. So it really set the stage for me for these bigger expeditions and tons of free time. And it also really kind of inspired me to continue working down that guiding track. Like, I really got excited about seeing the look on these students' faces. They're doing these brand new things for the first time. This student was from Chicago, like, inner city Chicago, and he's out there climbing on the west side of Mount Ritter, and these like life-changing events for these people, which is really cool, and that kind of started me down that guiding path that I haven't looked back from. As well, it just gave me this amazing vantage point from which to start climbing peaks from, like taking that climbing experience from Yosemite and really seeing how that can translate into alpine rock routes in the High Sierra. This is one of my top out ridge on one of my favorite peaks to guide, Bear Creek Spire, North Ridge. And there was a lot of really great mentorship going on in the Outward Bound School as well. This guy, Jason Wheeler, good buddy of mine. He's my age, but he was an awesome mentor. He started working for the Outward Bound School a bunch of years before I did. And he'd also spent a bunch of time in Patagonia. So he had been doing Outward Bound Patagonia programs for a number of years. And so as a course director, we got to spend a lot of time together. And he was giving me all this data on what to do if I was to go down there. So as soon as that 2-week hitch ended, I bought a plane ticket and just bought a one-way plane ticket to Buenos Aires and was going down solo and was just going to have this big sampler platter experience. Go to a bunch of different areas, find partners along the way, try to learn some Spanish, and just kind of try to make it happen. So a lot of people kind of think of this environment, these big spires, these intimidating granitic fangs that just pop up out of the glaciers out of nowhere. And yeah, this is Patagonia also, but Patagonia, kind of going back to this slide, is this massive range. It's everything from the 40th degree parallel south. It encompasses Chile, it encompasses the Andes, Argentina, and that's mountains and sort of the pampas, the big plains to the east. So it's this huge range. So it has tons of different climbing areas, not just Chaltén and Fitzroy and the Torres del Paine. So the first place I went to, basically I spent a month in each one of these like 3 iconic Argentine climbing destinations. And the first one is called Cajón de los Arenales. And Arenales is this radical place. Not a lot of people know about it. It's really popular amongst Argentine climbers and some Brazilians, but you're not going to meet a lot of other gringos climbing down there, even though it's pretty close to another really iconic climbing destination called Aconcagua. And the way that you get up to Arenales, or the way that you want to get up to Arenales, is by hiring a 4-wheel drive vehicle to get up there, and not hiring a taxi that you discover after the fact is fueled by propane. It was super funny trying to get in here the first time. We had all these haul bags. And so the car was just going slow as all get out, going up these hills, and you're up at like 10,000 feet. And so you'd have to take the bags out and then help the driver push the car up the hill, and then go back and get your haul bags and load them back in. And then inevitably, like 2 minutes later, there'd be another hill that you couldn't get up. So it was just a total goat show. But we finally got up there, and me and my buddy that I had, met through some friends, just started exploring these amazing canyons. It's, there's a little bit of information available, kind of a little handmade guidebook that you can find in a climbing shop down in Mendoza. But these are awesome walls. You're up at 12,000 feet, and the routes are 15 to 20 pitches long, just on this amazing red rock. And then the vibe in the hut is super cool because it's just this ragtag bunch of climbers that get dropped off there with a bunch of food, and you hang out and climb for as long as your food lasts, and then you hitchhike back down to town. And that's what we did. So this is my friend Amir and I, who I hooked up with. He was down there on a little climbing vacation as well. And so we took a bus from Mendoza and went down to Bariloche, which is just this amazing, almost European-like town in South America. Not surprising that it's sort of European-like. A ton of Swiss and Eastern European expats moved there right after the Second World War. And so there's these really amazing mountain huts, these refugios. So Refugio Frei is a really popular climbing destination in the summer, and it started to become a really popular ski destination in the winter. For us in the summertime, it's like as good as it can get. You can order a pizza and order beer on tap that gets flown in at this hut. You're camping on the outskirts of this kind of open gravel area, and then hanging out in the hut, meeting amazing people, really getting to know this like amazing Argentine culture that makes the climbing seem almost secondary, even though it's world class. You just have this rim of spires sitting above you, and every single one of these spires has a classic route on it. And it's just unbelievable being up on these things. Some of the summit blocks are like the size of your kitchen counter, and you're also not only getting amazing climbing and these really good views of down to the lakes. Bariloche has these fjords that lead into and out of it. And the climbing is amazing, but then you also get these amazing vistas out towards the west, out towards Chile. This is Mount Tronador, which is kind of like our equivalent of like Mount Shasta, Mount Baker, sort of about the same latitude to the south as we are to the north. Here we are looking out towards Chile, out into the fjord lands. And when you're up on these spires, it's not just you. You also get these incredible condors that start circling around you. And these guys are like 6 to 8 foot, maybe more wingspans. And they're just kind of silently gliding around you, just making you realize how cool of a place you're in. Here's Mateo doing his best condor impression. So after about 3 weeks of climbing in the Frei, I hopped on a bus, went down the dusty road down the Route 40 to El Chalten. And El Chalten is kind of the jumping off point for most people's climbing expeditions to the Fitzroy and Serratori Massifs. And it's kind of a relatively new, young town, sprung up in the 80s after some conflicts with Chile and Argentina. But really, it's just this kind of like purpose-driven town that is set up to house and feed climbers and backpackers as they go into and out of these mountains. And these are super big mountains, but they're not all that tall. Fitzroy is only about 12,000 feet tall, but it just rises right out of the southern Patagonia ice camp. And it's like 65 7,000 feet of relief. So these are huge routes, even for their relatively short stature. And here we can see the entire Fitzroy Range, all the way from De La Esse on the left, and then Guijemay on the far right-hand side there, with Big Fitz kind of holding court in the center. And when you get to this zone, you just realize, like, whoa, like, okay, I was kind of getting it in the fray. I was climbing really strong in Arenales, and then you get to Chaltén, you're like, I'm kind of out of my element here. There's a lot of stuff going on. There are glaciated approaches. The weather windows are short, so you have to be really fast and kind of dialed in your approach to these mountains. You know, some of the weather windows maybe last 24 hours. So there's definitely kind of a smash and grab aspect to the climbing down there. But that didn't stop us from going and trying. My buddy Wagner and I, good Brazilian buddy that has since become one of my lifelong buddies and climbing partners, we went and gave a half-hearted attempt on De La Esse, that small little pipsqueak spire on the far left-hand side of the range there. And we gave it a go, but it's like 10 pitches of 5-10 rock climbing after a glacier approach, and all the cracks were just seized up with ice, and it wasn't going to happen. So we wrapped down and did manage to get up something that year. We kind of did this relatively low-key ascent up Cerro Solo, kind of a glacier walk with a little bit of rock scrambling, but we got to summit and we got to see these amazing views down into the Torre Valley with Cerro Torre and the whole Torre Massif on the left, and then the Fitzroy Range on the right, and just recognized how cool this range was, and sort of how real it was too. So it was a big kind of highlighter for me, like how much better I needed to be. So I knew that I was going to come back to Chaltén at some point, but when I did it, I needed to be a lot better. So the next season I went down, this is kind of jumping forward a full year, almost a full year. Instead of going back to Chaltén, instead, me and my friend Josh went to Torres del Paine, which is kind of the analog to the Fitzroy Range, but it's in Chile. And the difference in these areas is that in Chaltén, you're kind of set up in town. You are hanging out, renting an apartment, and then you're just jamming up onto the mountains as soon as the weather looks like it's going to get good. But in the Paine, things are way farther apart. Town is like 5 hours by bus away, and then another 5-hour hike in to get to base camp. And this is what the view looks like from your base camp. So you're also going after these big granite spires, but you're cast way further out. So it kind of felt like we were more in that expedition mentality. We just weren't able to hang out in town and just kind of like fester as long. Kind of felt like we were in the mountains and sort of had to continue to be motivated, and kind of a lot like quarantine. So here I am hiking in up into the hike camp, just carrying a beastly load. And then where you base camp out of is this little hovel called Campamento Japonés. And this has been used by expeditions all the way back to like Chris Bonington and Willens, who did the first ascent of that central tower of Paine. And this is just like a total rat cabin that just gives you a little bit of respite from hanging out in the tents. It's like you get out of your tent and then hang out all day in the cabin playing cards, because it was at least somewhere to stand up. But it leaked pretty bad. We were really lucky. As soon as we got there, there was kind of a weather window that broke. And so I think like 8 days after showing up in the park and registering our expedition, we were charging up to go try to climb the North Tower of Paine, which is the spiky little summit sort of right in the center there. There's two summits of the North Tower, and then the really big chunk of rock there on the right-hand side is the Central Tower. And this is like a full value route. There's a snow approach, a bunch of mixed climbing to get to that little col. And then from the col, the climbing just gets really good, super clean, laser cut splitters that take you all the way to the summit. But just like a classic Patagonian route, we had a classic Patagonian day. And so not really knowing when the weather window was going to end, we were just kind of taking our sweet time. We were trying to go as fast as we could, but there wasn't a lot of hustle. And so when the wind started blowing and the snow started falling, right as we started rappelling down, and it was getting dark, we got caught a little bit with our pants down. So this was going to end up being my first, total all night benighted rappelling down a Patagonian spire with ropes flying everywhere, and definitely wouldn't be the last. But you can just see that look of just sheer terror in my eyes right there. Like, I am not having fun at all. We started up the route, I think, with 2 60-meter ropes, and by the time we touched back down to the snow at like 3:30 in the morning, I think we only had like 20 meters of one rope left. So it was exciting, to say the least. But the rest of that whole season was basically just tent bound, stuck down in the lowlands. We got great weather that first week, and then we had 10 weeks of just nothing but rain and snow, and the mountains just weren't cooperating. So we had a lot of home run derby down here. And that doesn't mean that there wasn't anything to do. We got to do a lot of cool trail runs in the area. The bouldering right above camp was super good, even though the landings weren't all that safe and sane. But, after being there for 11 weeks and climbing one route, we still learned a ton about managing our stoke level, our time, our motivation, our fitness in the mountains, just being kind of festering in camp there. But it was a really, really valuable experience. So back from Patagonia, I'm spending another season in Yosemite doing some more big wall and kind of recognizing all the things that I need to work on, right? Like, need to get better at fast aid climbing, need to get better at moving in the mountains. This is an awesome shot that Tom Evans took of me when I'm climbing the nipple pitch here on Zodiac. And Tom actually took this photo right before I took the winger of my life. I was trying to climb this pitch totally clean without nailing any pitons in. And right as I almost got to the anchor, I ripped a piece out and fell from where I am right here. I'm in the blue. And I ended up just below Josh there, who's tending rope in orange. It was a fall that was long enough for me to catch my breath and start screaming again the second time. But by this point, I'm feeling pretty confident on the big stone. I'm feeling good about moving fast on sort of LCAP style rock routes, but I didn't have as much experience moving really quickly in the mountains. So Josh and we decided to go and put our focus towards doing the Evolution Traverse, which is kind of one of the big long ridge traverses here in the Sierra Nevada. And at this point, like, I didn't know anyone who had ever done it. And I think still only there'd been maybe like 10 or 15 parties that had done it. It hadn't kind of really come into fashion as much as it has now. I mean, now you go out to these peaks and there's probably a couple dozen attempts or completions during the course of every single summer. But it was kind of cool that the only information we could find on this route was where it started, where it ended, and like a few terse sentences about like where to wrap off of Mount Darwin. So this route is like 9 miles long, crests over 13,000 foot peaks. And so you just have to learn how to go really fast, lightweight, but still remaining somewhat with a margin of safety. So we brought a rope, but we didn't use it a whole ton, and we did the route in 2 days, and since then it's been done a bunch of times in a single day, I think. So we're hiking out of there. You can kind of see the ridge line of the Evolution Traverse right there. And I hiked out and was heading back for one more work program for Outward Bound. And this is a really cool Outward Bound program that I got to work with. The Sierra Club had given this grant to the school to provide all these free programs to Iraq and Afghan veterans. So any branch of the service, you could sign up and you'd get this free 5-day backpacking program, which was really neat because like 30% of the participants had some form of PTSD, another 30% or so had been in actual combat. So it was really powerful to be part of that, even though I had none of that experience myself. What was really cool was that the Sierra Club sent along a photographer and a writer to do an article about the whole program. And this guy named Jerry Dodrell was the photographer. And as we're hiking along, and in camp, we started chatting, and I was telling him about my experience in Patagonia those first couple of years, and he started telling me about some of his trips down there. And he actually shared this really cool place that he had been into back in like 1999 or 2000 called the Rio Turbio. And Jerry forwarded me this hand-drawn map that he had gotten from somebody prior to his trip. And so that was all the information we had. It was just kind of like this total needle in a haystack. But that sparked this, really strong curiosity. And so I convinced Josh to basically plan an entire expedition to go into this place and see what it was all about, because Jerry was saying there's like 10 half domes up in there, and very few ascents have been made. A guy named Pedro Luthi, who had been a caretaker at the Frey Hut in the 1980s, would go in here, and he basically would spend his summers up there, and we'd kind of putter around, but almost all these walls remained unclimbed. So with nothing more than that little hand-drawn map, we decided to make a push to go in there. So fly down to Bariloche, do this huge food pack, and we planned to go in there for 25 days. That would turn out to be not enough food by a long shot, but we put all this food together. We get dropped off at the edge of this lake so that we could get taken by motorboat to the far end of the lake. And at the far end of the lake, you've got this really remote, isolated farming valley, really lush agricultural region. But the only way that you can get to this farm is either by boat or by horseback along the edge of the lake. So we just show up and we're like, hey, do you want to make a little bit of money and take us up valley? And they had done it a couple times before. We think we were something like maybe the 10th party to go into this valley. So it wasn't their first time, but they were definitely kind of like looking at us a little askew. Adrian here, the patriarch of the family in the felt hat, is loading our stuff up because it's like a 50-kilometer horseback ride to get up into this upper valley. And we got to hang out for a few days with Adrian and his family because the river was too high. Like the river was coming up to my thighs while sitting on these really huge horses crossing the river. So I can't imagine what it would have been like a couple days prior. So after 2.5 days of horseback riding, doing this 50-kilometer push, we get dropped off at this really old cattle ranching cabin that his dad had built back in the late 40s, early 50s, that really had kind of fallen into disrepair. And then from here, we just start shuttling our stuff all the way up into the upper valleys, kind of doing one load at a time. And it's like total jungle bushwhacking, like machete in a hand, pushing this like bamboo-like vegetation out of the way. And then this thing is probably still one of the most terrifying things that I've had to do. And we had to do this so many times because of the loads we were ferrying. It's this Tyrolean traverse that's like 75 feet above these huge rapids. And it's made out of laundry rope and wire. And you're just like, God, do I have to do this again? Like, oh, okay, I'm going to tie into a climbing rope here, so that at least when I fall and hit the rapids, I'm somehow going to be safe. I don't know why we convinced ourselves that climbing rope was a good idea. But once we finally get up into the upper valley, and that takes a couple of days of just marching up through the jungle, then we first get that view of those big walls. And this is just an amazing setting. If you have two valleys that split in either direction, from here to the left is the Paritas Valley, and then straight ahead you've got the Mariposa Valley. And so we first went into the Mariposa Valley, and our plan was to go 2 weeks up into the Mariposa, and then a week in the Paritas, and kind of see what we could get up to in both of these drainages. And these are massive, massive walls, like 3,500, 4,000 feet. Most of them had not been climbed. The Mariposa Wall right here, that's right behind us, didn't get climbed, I think, until like 2013. My buddy Paul and Will and Austin went in there and finally made it happen. And they had to actually raft to the base of the wall and climb their route and then rappel back down and raft back across. The Mariposa Valley is really cool. Like the camping scene is really sweet, which is good because there was a ton of rain, so we were tent bound for a lot of our time in there. But we were able to put up a couple new routes, 1,500, 1,600 feet long. The cracks a lot of times in here were pretty choked with vegetation, so it required a little bit of cleaning. And maybe from afar it looked like a really big crack, and up close it just closed in, and then there'd be vegetation in the back. So it was more of an exploratory climbing mission, but we still got to summit a couple really cool things, put up some neat new routes. And from one of these high points, we got to look into the upper Paritas drainage and look over at this wall that just really captivated us. So we knew, like, as soon as we got down, we needed to pack up and put all of our effort into pushing our camp over into the other drainage and seeing if we could put up a route on this feature right here. So we pull back around and put our camp up here just within view of Paritas right. And then the weather comes back in. It's like just torrential rain, and all we have is this little tarp that we brought with us. So we've got this 2-man expedition tent that we're stuck in, and then this tarp that we can hang out and play cards and try to pass the time. But by this point, we're like, okay, it's like 16, 17 days in, and we only have a week left of food, and the weather looks like it's just going to stay bad. So we started going on severe ration restriction. You can see that motivation and stoke is running at an all-time high here. And, you know, the course of our day was wake up and play some gin rummy and make like this tiny little chapati out of some of the flour that we still had, and then try to go to sleep till dinner time and then do it all again. So we were just getting rail thin. But finally the weather broke and we were able to jump out of our tents and head up into the high mountain and put up a route here on Paritas. And so where the red line starts, so the route itself is 500 meters long. It's like 1,800 feet or so. But that required something like 1,500 feet of rock climbing up to 510 just to get there. It's kind of like, picture Half Dome. You know, it kind of sits at the top of these big slabs. That's kind of how Paritas felt. So once we got up there, you know, mid-morning or so, we're looking up at the route, and it just unfolded right in front of us. The route finding was super easy because we just had these laser splitter tracks to follow. Really gorgeous climbing. You can see high. Our camp was right down there, kind of where the tail end of that river goes into the trees. And we topped out on the route just as the moon was rising and the sun was setting. It was just this super magical experience until it got dark and we had to settle in for our shiver bivvy. So at this point, I think that was the only remaining food that we had until we got back down to camp the next day. And we each had these pro bars, so we were like nibbling away at it all night like little rats. We built up this wall that you can see behind us to shelter us from the wind, and then the wind started blowing from the opposite direction. It was classic. But next day, woke up and rappelled down. Couple epics along the way. This is a previous picture from the Mariposa, and just looking back at the wall that we climbed. And this is probably one of the places that I've come as close as possible to meeting my maker. We were rappelling down, and we had to cross one of those upper snowfields, and we had like 20 rappels to do. So we were gonna save a lot of our stuff until we really needed it, and we were kind of being skimpy and minimal on the anchors that we were making. So on this one anchor, we only pounded in a single piton, and we tested the heck out of it. We were really pulling on it to make sure that it was a good pin. And then we decided to commit to it. So Josh is rappelling down, and I unclip myself from the anchor. And I'm like, I'm gonna put something else in. I just had this like nagging feeling in the back of my head, like, oh, come on, even where we are right now, we need one more piece. And right as I'm doing that, the anchor blew. And it just whizzes by me. And I'm just like, okay, great. This is how it all ends. Like, Josh just went to the bottom of the cliff and I'm gonna be stuck here. But I turn around and Josh is like 75 feet below me, and he's stuck on the bottom edge of this crevasse. So there's like a hanging glacier up here. And like, are you okay? He's like, yeah, I'm good. Pretty shaken up, but I'm good. Let's get out of here. So luckily I had everything, like all the soft goods in my pack that I could tie together and make this huge string of junk, like all the carabiners clipped together, all of the slings, a couple of them cut apart and tied together. And so I lowered this like hand line of junk down to Josh, and he could clip the ropes back, and I pulled him up and I just welded like 3 more pins in. It's like, I'm not going to see that happen again. So, it was like the highest high to the lowest low. But we got off the thing and definitely kind of went home a little bit with our tails between our legs. All right, all quiet on the Western Front there, sweet. And when we finally got back down to the Confluencia, where we had been dropped off by Adrian and the Gauchos, we didn't have to wait for him to show back up. We had actually planned for this, and we had brought in a couple of 2-person pack rafts. So that was the plan, was to raft these 50 kilometers back down and out. It's like class 2, pretty mellow, casual boating for the experienced boater. And for us, it was a little bit more touch and go. These things are not super seaworthy when they're just mounted to the gills with metal and stuff. But we finally made it back out. I lost like 16 pounds over the expedition. I think Josh lost 12 or 14. We ended up being in there for 35 days instead of 25. So we kind of got a little trimmed up. But luckily, Bariloche is the capital of ice cream and chocolate and amazing steak. So we could put that weight back on pretty quick. And it was really neat that we went in there with so little information, really just basing it off of this hand-drawn map that had fallen into my lap, and then make our own map and sort of make our own account of the adventure. So another year passes and I'm back to Bariloche. And this time I'm armed with a big, long work contract to work for the Outward Bound School. Because now I've already started kind of figuring out a niche to get myself down there, get my travel paid for, do a little bit of work, and then set myself up to go climbing in my free time. And Bariloche is just an amazing place to hang out. Like, I had already really started making some great friends and really getting into the culture there and just kind of feeling like I had a second home. But on my first trip, doing a staff training expedition, I did an awesome little front flip on my crampons while I was not paying attention and fell into a rock and broke a bunch of ribs. And so I was kind of out of commission and I had to give up a huge chunk of that work contract. So I convalesced in Bariloche. I hired a private language tutor and went back up to the hut at the Fray and just hung out and did some really low-end climbing and hung out with the hut keepers up there. But it ended up being a really big blessing in disguise, because then with all that extra free time that I now had, after I felt good enough to actually go climbing, I beelined it down to Shawl 10 and I was feeling just fired up and ready to go. So this time, unlike the first year I spent there where I was just kind of like overwhelmed by the size of these things, now I kind of felt like I was still intimidated, but it was like the appropriate level of intimidation. Like I was ready to climb these peaks. But given that I was there way before I was supposed to, way before my buddy Jeff, my climbing partner, was going to show up, I kind of had to scrap together a climbing partner, and we did that classic internet meetup, like it was a friend of a friend of a friend. And so it was kind of like we both just needed another person to climb with. It wasn't like we're showing up as a partnership. But we still managed to get along well enough to get up a handful of really cool routes. You know, we started off kind of small, starting on the right-hand northernmost section of the Fitzroy Massif. And the first route we climbed together was this amazing classic called the Brenner Ridge on Guijamais. So it goes up the left-hand skyline of this big wedge-like feature that you can see here. It's like 5:10 climbing with a little bit of time on the glacier. And this is a classic route that you'll just have parties lined up, like a party at every single belay ledge, if the weather window is really short, or if people are just looking for kind of like something easy to bite off. You know, it's relatively short, and then it's like 15 pitches long, but it's a good route to do in a day. Super classic. And from the summit, you can see Mermoz, you can see the summit of Fitzroy there, all the way out past Cerro Torre to the Patagonia ice cap. It's everything you want a day in the mountains in Patagonia to be. So Peter and I, this partner, we boogied back down to camp, back to town, sorry, after doing Guijamais, and the weather just kept looking good. So we had a couple rest days, but then we fired right back up and wanted to go attempt Fitzroy via the Franco-Argentine, this left-hand skyline of the peak on the right there, and try to do Pointe-Senot, which is the left-hand route here. We got halfway up the Franco-Argentine, and again, it was like iced up cracks, and we were moving slow, and it would have ended up being 2 days on the mountain for sure. But we had a great time on Pointe-Senot. This is a really classic alpine route. It's not the biggest or the baddest or the hardest, but it kind of requires that fully featured alpine skill set. You know, there's glaciers, there's snow, there's mixed climbing, rock climbing in boots. And if you really want to terrify yourselves, then after this little presentation's done, then Google Andreas Fransen skiing down the Willens ramp. This line here that cuts across Poinsonneau. He skied it a handful of years ago, and I can't even believe it. We had 2 tools sunk in, and we're still just mesmerized by the exposure. Yeah, it's not hard climbing. It's kind of this blocky, snow-filled cracks, but you're doing it in big mountain boots, and the route is like 20 pitches long, so you can't dawdle. You got to go fast. So it really felt like this brought all those skills together. We summited, rappelled back down all night, made it to camp at 2 or 3 in the morning. I think it took us like 22 hours round trip to do this route. And the weather kind of got bad for a little bit right after this. We were in town for 10 days, which is nothing compared to that first season in the Piney, right? But once the weather broke, we were ready to go rock climbing. You know, we'd spent a bunch of time on the glaciers, and we just wanted to get fired up and do a rock route out of the Torrey Valley. And accessing the Torrey Valley is really cool. You do this Tyrolean traverse across the Torrey River here, and then you get onto the Torrey Glacier. And unlike a lot of the other glaciers in the range, this is a dry glacier. So you're hiking in there in tennis shoes, carrying your boots on your back. It's super long, like you're on the glacier for like 9 kilometers, but it's pretty casual. You're not going to fall into a crevasse. If you can see it, you know, you can avoid it. And we were able to get up this really cool route on Saint-Exupéry called Chiara di Luna, which still is probably one of my favorite rock routes that I've ever done. 25 pitches, 511 minus climbing, just gorgeous splitter climbing. And the weather was so good that we had our pants rolled up to our knees, and almost all of our clothes was just bulging out of these little bullet packs that we had because it was so warm. But we still summited right as darkness started falling, and we didn't come back to camp where this photo is taken from until 8 in the morning or something. But at this point, it felt kind of like normal. Like we were comfortable rappelling all night through the unknown because we'd done it a bunch, and it felt just like, okay, it's still work, but we're not frightened by the exposure, frightened by the darkness. We could deal with all the stuck ropes, which there were many of, and just kind of do the work. But going back to this, but at this point, like me and Peter were kind of like on our last talking terms. You know, we were just partners by virtue of we had no one else to climb with. And that kind of reached a breaking point right before this weather window was about to break. So it was, you know, it was a little unnerving because we were going to have this great window of stable weather, high pressure, and he wanted to go do an objective I didn't feel comfortable doing with him. So we decided to split paths. He found somebody off the street to climb with, and I was left with nobody. So instead of just dawdling around and watching everybody go into the mountains and then stream back just with huge smiles on their faces like I did that first season down there, I decided to use that weather window and really kind of work on me, like do something that was going to really fulfill and reward me. So I again got this great mentorship, and he probably didn't even realize how vital this was, but I was going and chatting with my buddy Mikey, who had spent a ton of time down there, and he was just like, yeah, dude, just go just go get it. Like, you'll be fine. Pick a good objective and just go solo it. And he loaned me an extra rope, and he loaned me a gree-gree. And I went up into the Torre Valley by myself right before Christmas Day and soloed the Austrian Ridge on De La Esse here, just in this incredible day. And this is the peak that the first season down there I had been totally shut down on, that I had no business being there. And then this time I'm there by myself, like no partner to help me with the slack, nobody to turn to for like, hey, what should I do here? It was really cool that it was all me. And so I spent all day climbing this route and, summited in windless skies. And
all right, just made it up to the summit, De La Esse. Climbed the last pitch. Woo. Looking down, just took off the shoes a little bit. Oh man, such a beautiful day. Christmas Day, St. Exupery over there, Torre Valley. Oh, Cerro Torre, Egger, Stanhart. Folks are sending today. So sick. Now back down to the pack to get my little lunch.
yeah, that's what I looked and sounded like when I was 26 or 27 years old. But man, it wasn't the hardest route ever. It's like one of the smallest peaks in the range, but doing it by myself, having type 1 fun the entire day, just climbing rope length after rope length of just really amazing dry granite by myself on Christmas. It was super fulfilling, rewarding, and just kind of made me realize how much farther I'd come just in the past several years of being down there. But like my buddy Rob told me a long time ago after I bailed off of El Cap during an ill-fated solo attempt, and he asked me, well, are you soloing because you want to be alone or because you don't have a partner? I was like, oh yeah, that's pretty prescient. It's because I don't have a partner. So while De La Esse was awesome, I had way bigger aspirations and didn't want to do any of those alone. So I was really psyched when Jeff showed up. He had just gotten off of Aconcagua guiding, and so he was like ready to go. I was ready to go, and I finally felt like I had the partner that I wanted to get on the type of route that was going to really be an important route for me. So what we set our eyes on was the biggest rock route in the entire range. Instead of just taking any more baby steps, we just went and jumped into the deep end of the pool. And the route that we wanted to climb was called the Afanasieff Ridge. And it's basically, this is the west side of Fitzroy, and the feature that you're looking straight at, that big cleft, is called the Super Canaleta. There's a couloir feature that goes all the way to the summit. And the route that we decided to climb is that ridge just to the left, kind of just on the sun shade line. And as far as we knew, we were doing like the 7th or 8th ascent of the route since it was put up in the early 1970s. 45 pitches or so. I think that's when we stopped counting. Up to 510 plus, low 511 climbing. And what was really cool about this route, and just this time in particular, was how little information was out there for climbing in this zone. There was no guidebook. The online resources were kind of scattered all over the place. And so it was really cool having that lack of information, which forced us to go over to Rollo's house, Rollo Garibaldi, who's kind of the oracle of Patagonia. And Rollo was super gracious, and he was like, oh, dude, you want to go climb the Afanasieff? Sweet, like, I'll make you a map. Like, I did the second ascent of it. cool, like here's what you need to know. And so like we're about to hop on this almost 50 pitch rock route and then on-site rappel 20 pitches down the other side. And this is the only information that we have. This is the little hand-drawn topo, still splattered with raindrops, that's still sitting on my fridge that Rolo gave us. Because he's like, dude, if you don't hit this red sling, you're gonna be super screwed. So it's like, okay, like that's all we need to focus on is finding that red sling. My buddy John accompanied Jeff and I to the base. He was down there taking photos of glacier recession. And Jeff and I are here with the entire ridge line just in sight, right above my hand there. And just like El Cap was, man, it looks big from afar, and then you stand underneath this thing and like, oh, this is way bigger. Like, are we ready for this? Well, let's start putting the rope up and we'll see, because there's no fixed anchors, so we're going to the top or else. And the climbing was really good, just endless rope length after rope length. We were climbing really light. I think each one of us only had a 25 or 30 liter pack, which was good for climbing fast and not so good when we had to snuggle together and sleep under the same sleeping bag. I actually had a really nasty upper respiratory infection right before starting this route, and I was just chugging antibiotics like they were candy. And so I was just hacking like crazy all night, and Jeff's there next to me, big spoon, little spoon, I can't remember. I don't think either one of us got any sleep. But that first day, we went from town and then got to pitch 20 and bivouacked there on this tiny little ledge. And then we woke up the next day and just, we're having a blast. You know, we're climbing this route, finding all these old relics from Jean Afanasieff. We found his backpack kind of buried in snow and ice. And the climbing is just really good. It's kind of scrappy, alpine, broken terrain, but we're firing off pitch after pitch. And, you know, we do another 25 or 30 pitches that day and get to the summit. You know, and it's just like this surreal experience, nobody around. The summit of the entire mountain of Fitzroy is casting this shadow way out into the Pampas. It's warm enough, like we're wearing these light fleece jackets, and the sun is setting over there on the Torre Massif, and we settle in for the night. And then all day the next day, we rappel down that Franco-Argentine route, kind of touch and go at times, like no major epics like Josh and I had, but definitely like pretty exciting on-site rappelling, almost 25 or 30 pitches. So it really wasn't over until we rappelled over the Bergstrand here and hit the glacier. And that was kind of how we ended up that season. I was really lucky and stoked for the ability to climb 5 of those 7 summits in just 6 weeks. You know, it was a far departure from that first season down there, or that season in Torres del Paine, where we barely did as many pitches as we were there for weeks. And yeah, we left, you know, feeling like we'd really hit a lot of those goals. But as soon as you tick one thing off, another thing presents itself, and so that wasn't the last season that I would spend down in Argentina. I would continue to go back to Bariloche to kind of keep fostering those great relationships that I've been building, to continue working for the Outward Bound School. Yeah, this is my good friend Wanda. This is on my 30th birthday. She made me this awesome dulce de leche cake in the backcountry while we were working for the Outward Bound School together. And so these are the kind of relationships that really kept me coming back down. The climbing is great, but the culture is amazing, super inviting, and And so those are the kind of reasons that I continue to go back down. As well as giving back to that community. You know, I was really, really fortunate to work one of those Outward Bound programs as a service project. Meeting this 80-year-old gaucho who taught us how to build these fence lines that he needed repaired. And so it was those kind of things, like I'd done the climbing, I'd hit the summits, I'd fulfilled myself, and then it was like time to give back and to build these deeper meaning relationships. So what does the future hold? I would love to go back down. It's been a few years now. I'm still looking to climb Cerro Torre, and the Central Tower of Paine. We stopped just shy of on our attempt, but I really started focusing on my guide exams, my guide education, and working in that direction. Jeff, in the meantime, has really made a name for himself in high altitude expedition climbing and has guided K2 and Everest a couple of times. And so he's really done well for himself there. But moreover, you know, it seems like for me, Patagonia is kind of like that bridge has been crossed and that experience has really sort of been logged. And I'm looking for new adventures, new places. And a lot of time that's with guests. So the last thing that I want to kind of leave on and before we wrap up and open it up to some question and answers is that, you know, the highlight I think of this experience, all these experiences really show me how easy it is to have an amazing adventure, just leaving that map behind, just foregoing all that internet research and going into your local hills and just going and hiking around and climbing by sight. You know, you don't need every single little bit of information, and the less information you have might lead to a more rewarding experience in the long run.